America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You're not.
Okay. All right. I would now ask for a moment of silence in memory of Roland Fortin Sr., who passed away on June the 29th. Mr. Fortin was hired by Southington Public Schools in August of 1975 and worked for us until January of 1992. So a moment of silence for him, please. Thank you. And next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of June the 27th.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? I'm sorry?
You pick.
You can just pick somebody, it's fine.
Okay, we're going to talk slowly, gentlemen. We're going to talk slowly. No competition for the motions, please. Any discussion about the minutes? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I'd like to make a motion to move item 9C, out-of-state field trips, to item 6D.
do I have a
Second.
second?
Second?
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So I'm moving this up to field trip to,
Well, I made this.
They made it.
Yes.
okay.
But if you want to give
That's
Jasper
okay.
credit for everything, that's fine.
That's okay.
Jasper,
Whoever's voice you hear first, it's fine by us. Okay, so that passed. And 11G, all right. Trips, I'm just writing a note here. Communications from the board. Do any board members have any communications besides me? Okay, I'd like to share a few things with you, if I may. I had been asked, I had gone to a meeting of STEPS, even though they don't meet during the summer. We met with the new chair of STEPS, Steve Nyrick, and I found out some very exciting news for STEPS. They've been working to combine their asset building and emotional intelligence concepts, which have been practiced in our schools for many years, but delivered separately. In the marriage of the two, STEPS has created a one-of-a-kind program tailored just to the needs of our students. While the name will remain the same, Asset Building Classroom, the new components will help every teacher incorporate asset building and social and emotional learning more easily. They're going to be rolling it out to grades K through 5 this year, and next year the middle school and high school, because as we all know, the more assets and tools our kids have, the more likely they are to stay away from risk-taking behaviors, including, violence and substance use. STEPS asked me if I would publicly thank Christina McGarriher, I believe is, okay, and their curriculum writers, Kate Colinero, who's from Daranowski, Anne-Marie Gowdy, who's from Strong, and Amy Pager from Daranowski for their hard work and dedication to writing the lessons for the district. So they're going to be rolling that out. And I believe they're coming in September. STEPS is coming to make a presentation, September, October, I'm not sure.
September, October.
Okay, wasn't sure. Couple other things. The play-based learning article, you all got that because we had talked about play-based learning. So that's why I sent you the article. It was in the Hartford Current, and it was a far better explanation of something that's been going on. So that's why I wanted to share that. And then there was an interesting article, I think 2 days later. After announcing his support for phone-free school policies in his 2024 State of the State address, Governor Lamont proposed legislation that would have required the Connecticut State Department of Education to produce a model policy for cell phone use in schools. That provision did not make it into the legislature's final bill, but a spokesperson for the governor said the governor directed the department to draft the guidance anyway, so that the Connecticut State Department of Education Commissioner is collaborating with CABE to draft a policy, which is slated for a vote by the State Board of Education at their August 21st meeting. Now, have we heard anything on this, Mr. Super? I didn't think so. Because that's awfully tight timeline, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine if it's a policy that boards would then have to take up through their personnel and policy committees and then talk about, adopting as is or with any modifications, or our own policy altogether. But
Oh, I'm ready.
Yeah, I mean, we've all talked about it, and I know it's been talked about at the policy committee, and I know Mr. Whitehead was talking about it just, I think, the last meeting, so keep tuned. Two other things. I had a CCM presentation from the School and State Finance Project, Lisa Hammersley, and her executive assistant director, rather. I didn't catch the name. I must admit, the seminar was for financial administrators, so it was like over a lot of it. I mean, some of it I had, but if you're interested, it's on the CCM website. They did record it, so you can see it. And CABE had a seminar called How Administrators Create Budgets, given by the finance directors of Naugatuck, Cheshire, Mansfield, and Stonington. We're familiar with the process here, but it was very interesting to hear how other towns develop their budget, what their approval process is, and things that work and things that don't work. But one thing that I wanted to share with Mrs. Mallet is that three of the administrators the finance directors rather, seem to be very interested in a program called ClearGov, which helps formulating budget drafts and putting together board books that only one of I think it was the Stonington rather, financial director uses, and the other three were like, what's that? And it was, instead of spreadsheets and whatnot, they were very interested. I knew this much about it, so, it was just curious to hear how other places do things, so. Are you familiar
I do
with that?
believe that our town's finance department has reached out to that group.
Oh, okay.
And I'm not sure if they've moved forward or not, but there's some information at the town level.
Okay, well, because they were talking about that versus Excel spreadsheets and putting stuff together and whatnot. So just sharing that in case it's something you might be interested in the future. So again, that's another webinar that is on the CABE website. So if you're interested, you can go and you can hear it yourself. So that's all I have to say. Moving right along to communication from the administration.
thank you, Madam Chair. Brief report tonight. I'm pleased right now with our current hiring and the certified vacancies, although we did receive one yesterday and another one today for certified positions. But prior to that, we were hovering right around 5 certified vacancies at this point, which out of 650 certified staff, that's pretty outstanding. I really want to commend our building administrators who have spent a lot of time interviewing and hiring this season. And so we seem to be in an okay place there, to be continued. The summer work projects, Mr. Romano, if he's awake back there in the corner, the guy's got to be exhausted because he's, here at the crack of dawn every morning, 6:30, he's the first guy in the building, often the last one out lately. We've got multiple building projects occurring across the board, and I look forward to providing you a complete update at the end of the summer season on the different projects that have occurred. This is informational, but I know you all know about it. Dr. Lemons is going to be reaching out to all of you, so if you haven't met with him already, he's going to be reaching out to you to have a one-on-one focus session around the development of our strategic plan. The feedback I've gotten so far from both Dr. Lemons and the board members that have met with him has been positive. And then lastly, the district-wide facilities update relative to the elementary and KSA projects. We left off in the spring with the potential for recommending a scenario to the board in September once we gathered all the appropriate information. One of the pieces of information that I think the committee still needed to see was the debt analysis, the debt service analysis, which would kind of help us understand, could we recommend one building project or 2 building projects and what that would look like, what would be the cost to the town, what would be the impact on the debt service. So before we're able to make any recommendations to that facilities committee, we're trying to finalize what that looks like both in the same year but over staggered periods of time, which that debt service analysis will be brought to the facilities committee first in September, and depending on the outcome of that, a potential recommendation could be coming forward. And that concludes my report this evening.
Okay. Any questions of the superintendent? Thank you, Mr. Medancy. Okay. Communications from the public. If you would like to speak on any agenda item, please come up to the podium and give your name and address. But this is just for agenda items. If it's on the agenda, you can. I don't have the agenda, so I don't know what the. Okay. There's agendas right there in the.
Right by the door, yep.
Yeah. If I could ask what, you're here because of? Okay, you're gonna have, yeah, that's not on our agenda, so we'll have to, okay, that'll be at the end of the meeting during the public comment, which is, okay, before, all right, thank you. Anyone else for anything? No? Okay. Yeah, we're gonna have that, I'm gonna add that after. Okay. Just for everyone's understanding, if someone did submit an email, which we had gotten a couple of emails on various items, they're not gonna be read, they're gonna be attached to the minutes of our meeting, okay? Just so you understand. All right, next item on the agenda is the superintendent's report. I'll take a
Nope.
motion.
Field trip.
Oh, field. Why do I always do that? Why do I always do that? And I have it right here. Field trip, do I have a motion?
Move that the Board of Education approve the field trip requested as presented by the administration.
Second.
Okay, any discussion, any questions? Okay, seeing none. All those in, oh,
Is
yeah.
there anybody here from the,
I see Mr. Orion.
So, yeah, no, we had shifted, pretty much mid-year last year. If it's a standing trip that they've always gone on, we didn't require them to come for the permission, but we did ask them to come back at the conclusion of the trip and provide you guys with kind of how the trip went, the highlights, the updates.
Did you have a question on it, Mr. Darrenowski, or just wondering if someone?
no, it's just unusual. Usually when they come,
Yeah.
we have a whole entourage, but
I'm hoping.
That
for the-
group, yes, they traditionally are right.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I'm hoping for the entourage to tell us how it went.
Correct. Yep.
After the fact, so we can
No,
hear
that's
all
fine.
about it.
That's-
Okay, okay.
Just
All
curious.
those in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Now on to the superintendent's report. Do I have a motion?
The personnel report?
Yeah, personnel report.
Yes, I recommend the Board of Education improve the personnel report as submitted by the Human Resource Department.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Old business, town government communications. Anyone? No? Okay. And now we have policies.
Busy, busy.
Busy, busy. Second readings. Go for it.
Move that the Board of Education approve policy 3433.1 as presented by the Policy and Personnel Committee.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Move that the Board of Education approve policy 3518 as presented by the Policy and Personnel Committee.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Do you want me to, just, the
Can we
numbers
do-
are fine? Is this?
Yeah,
Is this
yeah,
okay? Move that the Board of Education approve policy 3524.2 as presented by the Policy and Personnel Committee.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Move that the Board of Education approve policy 4116.1 as presented by the Policy and Personnel Committee.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Move that the Board of Education approve policy 5117.2 as presented by the Policy and Personnel Committee.
Second.
Any discussion?
Aye. I'm just going ahead.
Jump the gun.
You're fine.
Jump right in there, Mrs.
Right.
Carmody. All those in favor?
Aye.
Mrs. Carmody?
Move that the
Sorry.
Don't worry about it.
Move that the, move that the Board of Education approve policy 5124 as presented by the Policy and Personnel Committee.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
You could say ahoy. Move that the Board of Education approve policy 5141.7 as presented by the Policy and Personnel Committee.
Second.
Well, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Move that the Board of Education approve policy 5144.1 as presented by the Policy and Personnel Committee.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Move that the Board of Education approve policy 5145.4 as presented by the Policy and Personnel Committee.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Move that the Board of Education approve policy 5146 as presented by the Policy and Personnel Committee.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Move that the Board of Education approve policy 6141.31 as presented by the Policy and Personnel Committee.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Move that the Board of Education approve Policy 6146.2 as presented by the Policy and Personnel Committee.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And move that the Board of Education approve Policy 6177 as presented by the Policy and Personnel Committee.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. And thank you to the Policy Committee for,
Maybe next time we can just
A lot of work.
vote on the whole series.
well, it just, okay. Okay. New business. 9A, tennis courts. Mr. Medancy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The board has received correspondence on a couple of occasions from members of the public and some of our elected officials concerning the current condition of the tennis courts, along with a request that it's placed on one of our agendas for discussion. So hence, it's on the agenda this evening. With that said, I just did a little bit of background for folks, that just to bring you up to kind of where the tennis court has been and where it currently is. So folks may recall that the tennis court, complete replacement of the tennis court reconstruction to bring it up to USTA standards, essentially changing the footprint of the tennis court. On two separate occasions it was cited. One, it was cited as part of an OCR investigation relative to the softball fields, but it talked about lack of handicap accessible seating at the tennis courts. However, there was nothing that needed to be done at that time because you'd only have to do work if you did work to the courts. So we weren't required at that time to change what the seating arrangement was there. It was again brought forward as within the scope of a project relative to the complete overhaul of the athletic facilities, which went to referendum and ultimately failed. So as folks may know, since then we have been taking on each portion of the facility piece by piece, trying to address what we can within our fiscal means and based on what's been determined as priority based on, lived beyond its useful life, if you will, liability, safety, and whatnot. The first thing that was addressed through the town partnership with the town manager was the softball lighting and dugouts. That was the basis of the original Title IX complaint that we were cited for. And so we were able to cash fund the dugouts and the lights. The entire scope of that project was around $400,000. The next portion of the athletic facilities that we addressed which is being done right now, is the track. As we all know, the track was not used this past spring and used sparingly when it was because of the condition of the track. It was deemed unsafe and not raceable, if you will, given the rubberized surface. So, with the town's support, we applied for the STEEP grant. The amount of the grant that we received from STEEP, from the state essentially, fully funded the town's portion, and the board used non-lapsing funds that they had access to at the time to fund the remaining amount that was required in order to qualify for the grant. People can see that right now, that work is underway and scheduled to be completed by September 15th. The third area that we had heard from residents about over the years was the bleachers, and a lot of it was, again, lack of handicap accessibility, but for our seniors, no rails, kind of unsafe slip surfaces, and Mr. Romano was having to have an engineer go out there every year and again, certify that we could use them for one more year, given the condition against the amount of, use that those bleachers get, especially graduation when you have thousands of people on them. The town manager, once again, he cash funded this year through the capital budget, year one of what would take to replace the bleachers, with the plans to fund year two in the next budget year. I think the challenge for the bleachers, just like what I'll speak to in the tennis courts, is because it costs over $1 million to replace it, we would either have to go to referendum in order to bond it, or we would have to find a way to cash fund it. So the cash funding over 2 years is one way we've been able to do it within the means of, the budget dollars that are available to the community. Which brings us to the tennis courts. So the tennis courts were presented to the board this year as part of the capital improvement plan, with a scheduled replacement date of 26-27. And the reason that year was chosen was, quite frankly, because we were going to do year 2 in 24-25 of the bleachers, along with the turf replacement. And we didn't think we could get the year 2 of the bleachers, the turf replacement, and the tennis courts all done at once. And there wouldn't be cash funding available to do that through capital and the annual operating budgets that are adopted. And so, you know, it was ultimately approved by the board at a 26-27 request of the town for capital. The town manager then took, you know, our capital plan, he synthesized that, brought that into his capital plan, and the town ultimately adopted that capital improvement plan with the 26-27 replacement date. I think that the challenge that we run up against with that is that the current conditions of the court really don't allow it to stay the way it is until 26-27. I think everybody has known for a while that the tennis courts have been a challenge to maintain, because it's not so much just about the surface. The real challenge with the tennis courts is about the subsurface. And so we repaired the tennis courts, all of the cracks, in-house initially in 2020, with our Mr. Romano and maintenance staff, and it took about a month and a half to complete, and it lasted 2 years. In 2022, we replaced all the cracks again, trying a different approach with an outside vendor, which got us now to 2024. So clearly we know, having repaired it twice already, it's because it's not really the surface, it's the subsurface. So you can keep filling the cracks and smoothing it over and painting it over, and they're gonna come right back. Even more so of the challenge is, I think, as the subsurface continues to shift over time, each time the cracks come back, they're more difficult to repair. And I think even right now, you couldn't repair them this fall because whatever winter does to the subsurface ultimately might just have those cracks reemerge before the spring season even starts again, you know? And so the temporary solutions that we've been able to buy ourselves time with are really no longer a feasible or logistical option or logical option. Mr. Romano and I have talked about this extensively. We've gone out there on multiple occasions. We've gone out there both, you know, before each time it was replaced, prior to the referendum, and then each time it was repaired. And again, it makes the surface playable to a degree, but it's not the ideal solution. I think the other area that folks have expressed concern about relative to the tennis courts is that the dimensions of the facility don't let the courts meet what are considered USTA standards, you know, the Tennis Association standards and guidelines. A good example of one of the areas where they don't meet the standards is where the end line of the court is relative to fixed obstacles. The fixed obstacles in this case is the fence. So if you don't have enough room between the end line and the fence, that's an area the USTA standards prescribes how much space you should have. So that's just one example. They also don't meet USTA standards because of that in length, because of the fence, and also width. You know, so folks have also expressed a desire to have courts that meet USTA standards. That's not a repair issue or a maintenance issue. That's been an issue since the day those courts were installed, you know, 20 years ago. Because the footprint was the footprint, you know? And so they fit the courts that they could fit there at the time the courts were installed. But ultimately, I think why they raise that as a concern now, that if we are going to do something, is this an opportunity to bring them up to USTA standards and not simply replace what currently is there and still not meet standards, even though we knew that this may have been an opportunity to address that. You know, we have gone, we had an estimate at the last, when we did the capital project improvement plan, an estimate of $1.3 million. So we knew right away that if it's over $1 million, that puts us at a referendum point by charter. And unless we can find other means. Recently, I asked for updated quotes because our last quote was from 2023. And the most recent 2 quotes I received was to do an asphalt-only replacement, existing footprint, just the asphalt surface, is $432,000. The problem with asphalt is, A, it doesn't fix the footprint, but really what most folks would tell you is that's the problem with the current court. You needed something called post-tension concrete. And post-tension concrete would allow, you know, right now if you look at where the posts are on the actual court, they're almost pointing in a little bit. A lot of that is you know, the vibration and use over time. It's not rated for that type of tension and stress. And so the post-tension concrete replacement of the existing footprint would be $1.12 million. Again, just asphalt, existing footprint. A second vendor quoted us at $1.5 million, which would cover the engineering expenses and also address the footprint issues. So it's, as we can see, it's slightly more, but it would get us to the USDA standards. And the first quotes I read to you do not address work that would need to be done if we change the footprint relative to like retainer wall, drainage, things like that we know that are there on the tail end of the tennis courts. So I think, either way, you're looking in a ballpark at $1.5 million. We would obviously, put together an RFP and put it out to bid to get something beyond just a quote. These are right now just rough estimates. But this company, the first company did go out to the actual site and see the property, to look at what it would constitute. So I have faith in their number, other than the fact it doesn't include the engineering, the drainage, and the retainer wall. I think our challenge as a board, as you all know, we don't have contingency. We don't have funds left in non-lapsing. We don't have a capital account of our own. So ultimately, even if the board agrees that we need to do something to address the current conditions of the court, we would need to work with the town in order to address what the options might be, given the current conditions and what the appetite is to address this. So that could mean either going to referendum, or if it were cash funded, you wouldn't need to go to referendum. But again, ultimately, I don't make that decision. I think that is up to other folks on other boards. One of my worries about waiting until November, if we decided to go to referendum, we wouldn't get the answer until November of whether it passes or not, which essentially means we're not even going out to bid to engineer the project and award the project until the winter, which means that there's no chance that it's going to be engineered, awarded, and completed by March 20th, because they can't do the work over the winter. The subsurface is the end game, right? We know this. Another concern I have is if we tried to pursue steep grant funding again. So originally, I think there was some thought that we couldn't qualify again since we were just awarded a grant and that project hasn't been closed out yet. When I contacted and spoke with the folks, at the state, we can apply again for the steep grant. However, the steep grant is only essentially open once the governor opens and announces it. He hasn't opened it and he hasn't announced it yet. So there really isn't a steep grant to apply for yet at this point. And again, you have to apply and you may get it, you may not. But if we were to receive a steep grant, the maximum amount you can get is $500,000. So it would still require us to harvest some more cash if we truly wanted to replace them and change the footprint. Again, no guarantees you get the grant, and no guarantees you get the $500,000, because it is actually also against everybody who's awarded the grant. It gets divided up amongst the amount of towns that apply for the grant in a given year. So the governor only puts a certain set number there, and that's what it is. But again, my concern more is the timeline. One other option I looked at is something called right-way crack repair. And Kyle Fickle has helped us and pursued more information on this. But when they sent us the original quote, the first company for the 1.1 post-tension concrete complete replacement, they shared information about other options. Resurfacing, which is not an option at all, because resurfacing is their fancy way of repainting it every 3 or 4 years to keep it, like sealing your driveway, to keep it from cracking and heaving and all that stuff. That wouldn't be an option. But the option that caught my eye was something called right-way crack repair, where they route out the cracks, they blow out the cracks, they fill it multiple times with acrylic cement that would adhere. Then they cover the cracks and seal them, and then they repaint over them entirely, which essentially would be a lot more of a foolproof crack repair plan than what we've been able to do. The problem is with that, the quote came in at $188,000. And they put right on the quote, they will not warranty the project because they are recommending replacement of the tennis courts. So, the crack repair is like, yeah, we could do it and it may work for you, but don't, we're not going to stand by it because we don't believe that that's the root of your issue. And they're not wrong, right? We all know it's the subsurface. I'll go back to that. And so my biggest concerns for the spring, as we discuss this, even with funding earlier than a November referendum, can we get the project engineered, out to bid, and completed by March 20th? I think that would be tight. I just watched, I live in Wallingford, they just replaced the tennis courts across from the YMCA there in town that Lyman Hall plays on, and it took far longer than 2 months. Because there's a whole settling process of the subsurface, there's a curing process of the pavement before they can paint, stripe, there's the posting of the fences. I think it's a bigger project than people realize. And I would say in ours, it might be a little bit more complicated because we know that there's dimensions of, like Wallingford didn't change their footprint. They put the same amount of courts in on the same footprint. We would be changing the footprint of that property and extending it and building a retaining wall and addressing drainage and trying to get a new tennis court installed all by the March 20th. So I would hope that as we have a conversation about this with the community and the town and amongst everybody, yes, we all agree and probably would desire to have it the best that it could be for the kids, but we have to be realistic about the timelines and challenges associated with it, right? Funding and just where we are right now against when the season comes. So if we can't get that replaced by the spring, what are the options? Well, the options for the board that I would share, and then I would ultimately take your direction. One would be another low-cost temporary repair. Right, we could try and figure out, Mr. Romano and I, like if and when, and hope that it would hold, and that would at least salvage the spring season with the courts in better condition than they are right now. We could go with the more advanced repair solution, but I think knowing that's not warranted and $188,000, I think you're throwing, bad money, right? Good money after bad, but I would say bad money even at that. You could play on the courts that are deemed playable. So the boys tennis coach and the athletic director walked the courts 2 weeks ago, and they did feel that 5 of the 7 courts were playable. They did put sawhorses up on the 2 courts that they just felt like, these might be pushing the boundaries and we wouldn't want someone, to roll an ankle or something on it. So they closed off those 2 courts, but we didn't want to close down the whole facility because if the coach felt that those courts were at least deemed playable, even though they're in need of repair, at least that would give folks access to 5 of the 7 courts that are up there. But with that said, they acknowledge that all 7 courts need repair. So just because they're playable, nobody felt that nothing should be done. Or you play off-site for a season, and you do a spring-summer installation of new courts, because that's when you got your weather, that's when you got your timing, your engineer, your design, your funding, you got everything lined up. And so I think best-case scenario, if you had the perfect world, could you get the funding right away, get the RFP out right away, and get at least the site work done in the fall prior to the winter, and then see what you could do in the spring that might give them maybe part of the season that they could close out the season on in the new facility. That would be, you would need a promise from your vendor, your contractor that you award the bid to, and you would really need to hope that winter doesn't last too long in March, because the tennis season starts March 20th. And we know we've had years where it just runs longer than we all want it to.
Where would you play off-site? Where are they recommending going off-site?
So that would be something the athletic director would work out, similar to what other towns have done in the past. When Cheshire was replacing their turf field, we accommodated them.
We're looking at like Memorial.
Well, the problem with those facilities is there's not enough courts for the amount of athletes for varsity matches. So you'd probably have to play off-site at multiple facilities if you did it that way, which I think transportation, logistically, just team sports, all of that, even though it's an individual sport, there's a team component to it. I think going to multiple locations off-site might create logistical challenges that, may not be worth it. You could talk to a Wesleyan and see if you could use their tennis facility with multiple courts. Some of those places that have central, Connecticut, that have facilities that might be willing to, if you're willing to work your schedule around their schedule, they might be willing to accommodate as, partners in helping and assisting. You could play it at other high schools. It's been done. Like, okay, if your matches are on these days and these days, can we come in our matches on these days and these days? For that to occur, it has to be a facility with lights, because their team's still going to want to practice, and they're not going to just cancel practice on the days that we, want to come in and use it for competition, unless you were to work out something, let's say with the Meriden schools, where on the day that you have your away meets, can we use your courts for home matches? So that because you won't be using your facility that day, and then we'll use it that day. That still puts our kids in a bind for practices where they're going to do all that. It's just, I think it's not an easy solution. And as you can see, it's been on everyone's radar for a while. We've repaired it twice. It went to referendum. It's not for a lack of people wanting to. It's for a lack of you can't pull 5 gallons of water out of a 3-gallon bucket, right? And so when you're faced with that situation, you ultimately have to do it part and parcel, which has led us to where we are today. So I would entertain any other questions or any direction the board may have from me.
If I may.
Yeah.
Say, having been in more of like the construction aspect of things, I like the idea of potentially doing the, the prep work in a spring and allowing it to sort of settle over the summer and then ultimately finishing the project in the fall. So I think it would bring us in more into the, I guess you'd either wait for the season to be completed or you'd essentially do the off-site option. Now, with the off-site option, could then potentially, even though that they'd be smaller facilities like Memorial and Panthorn, could we essentially break the teams up and utilize different areas of town?
Yeah, I mean, right now there are 7 courts up there, and I think to my knowledge, our largest facility has 4, and the others have 3.
Okay.
So it'd be buses going to multiple
Have to
locations.
essentially use two. Well, but it's more for the practice aspect.
Yeah,
right?
that part we could navigate with.
Okay, so again, like, as long as we could check the box with the practices and still keep that in town, I think would be pretty important. And then I'd love the opportunity to try and work out with other facilities. I mean, that could be a really cool opportunity for our kids to play at a Central or something like that. The other question that I had was, in these quotes that you're getting, are we looking at the cement option? Or this is just
Yes,
asphalt?
no, the higher quotes are the post-tension concrete, Kyle. When he's worked with them, that's kind of what we're looking for, and
So like
Peter.
the 1.5, the 1 point, like,
Yeah.
so 1.5 being like all.
You know,
written.
again, it'd have to go to RFP and out to bid to truly get, what does this encompass? You
Right.
know, and, you know, is it the engineering? Is it the drainage work? Is it the retainer wall? Is it the
Okay.
fence replacement? Is it using the existing fence? But the one thing I think everybody agrees is you want post-tension concrete because it ensures the longevity of the project. Asphalt's just not gonna hold up in the New England weather. We would end up down in this situation again in less time.
And then I had the one last thing. So I know that, not to sound silly, but pickleball being as big of a, I guess, a conundrum as it's sort of turned into, would it be against tennis guidelines to essentially have lines for pickleball play and that type of thing? You know, because again, like
I love the question.
And at the end of the day, like, so this is essentially where my mind goes is, at the end of the day, like, I love the fact that, again, this is, our schools and our athletic areas are for the town. So I love seeing, you know, kids playing with their parents and grandparents, you know, driving by as I'm going home from work, you know, having a game of tennis or what have you. So it's just more, you know, is that an option?
So I can only speak from, and I'm not an expert on that. I've never seen a tennis court with more than one set of lines. Even in Wallingford, where they just replaced the tennis courts, it's still just the standard USTA. What they did in town instead is they repurposed a different set of tennis courts to exclusively pickleball courts.
Gotcha, okay.
That's because you want to play pickleball against Mrs. Carmody, but
I wanna-
I'm just going to ask 2 questions. The temporary repair, not the 188, which they can't guarantee, but a lesser, is it possible for us for next season? Because I lived through having to transport my son his senior year of high school. He could not play on the turf field because there was no turf field. And it wasn't a great experience. We had to go to various schools. We went to Cheshire, we went to Meriden, blah, blah, blah. But I'm thinking, I don't know the timeline. So is it possible to, say, repair them temporarily and then start construction right after the end of the season? Would that be enough time so that you could get it done for the next season? I'm just asking, I'm throwing that question out because I don't know what the timeline is.
Sure. I have to say that the variable that Mr. Merdancy explained to you about weather is really what's going to drive that.
Yeah.
We were lucky enough in 2022 that the weather, the problem is it has to be 40 degrees and rising, not the air temperature, but the surface temperature. So sometimes it's not about whether it's even snowing, it's how cold it has remained for the winter. In '22, don't quote me on it, but I think we had the tennis team play their first few matches away just so that we could
Okay.
get that. It's possible, but, you know, there's no way to guarantee that to you.
Okay. So say, for example, so say Mother Nature cooperates, we do that, we get the courts repaired for the next season, okay? The day the season is over, we then start construction of new tennis courts.
Sure.
So you're actually spring, summer. How long does it take to redo them properly and correctly to the tennis guidelines?
Sure. I'd have to see the plans. Purely speculating, you're
Speculate.
easily a 4 or 5 month process.
Okay,
you
so
know.
we could do that we could do it over the summer, say?
Correct. Well,
Into the fall?
the first step, and I'm sorry we haven't spoken about this, but the first step really is to get an architect
Mm-hmm.
involved and have them come up with the design. You have to have that design before you can even really go out to an RFP, but,
Okay.
so that's really where the immediate focus would be, is to get an architect on board, and then we can go out to RFP and work on a schedule.
Okay, okay, because I don't know much about tennis court design or architecture,
Sure.
but I do know, we don't have the money for this.
No.
So what if we went to the town and said,
Just like we do with anything over $50,000. I mean, that's our standard practice. Anything over $50,000 goes to the town. We request that because it becomes a major project or equipment.
Yeah.
And then the town, they do what they can with it, whether they include in capital or, we had several projects this year, part of our operating
Yeah.
budget that were over $50,000 that the town ultimately supported, outside of the operating budget process. So over 50,000, I certainly could go to the town and entertain the conversation and put the ball in their court.
I think you got to do that. Step
No pun
one-
intended.
Yeah. I mean, step one is find funding.
yeah,
That's step one.
yeah, it's
Qu-
money.
A question though, going back over the temporary repairs, what was the cost for each of those? We did it, you said 2020 and 2022.
Sure.
What did it
So-
cost each time?
In 2020, I apologize, I don't know those numbers. We bought material and we're experimenting in-house. We had a couple of our maintenance staff that really worked hard on it and did a nice job, took a lot of pride in it. So obviously, when they started seeing the cracks reappear, it was frustrating to them. I don't know what the dollar value of that was. I can tell you in 2022, we actually had a caulking contractor come in and do the work, and that was in the neighborhood of $10,000. I don't know whether we can do it again with caulk because some of the cracks are wide enough that you can lay your cell phone in it flat,
Right.
So I don't know whether we can go with that, but we are talking to a caulking contractor as well as a crack sealing contractor that would normally do roads. So we're going to continue to investigate for the short term.
Yes, that's what I'm looking at, right? I mean, if we're talking about, we've got 5 of 7 courts that are usable, but even those 5 courts have problems. We've got to at least at a minimum address those 5 courts and make sure that, right, safety and everything else. So I would like to make sure that we take a good look at that. And then obviously, I would also fully support, having the superintendent start, talk with the town manager and work with the town and start looking at, what's
Would be a great idea.
the next what's the next step to,
I'm
to
seeing a
start.
lot of heads nodding. Are we all in agreement with that? Yeah. All right,
All right.
all right. Mr. Mediancy, if you will
I will
start.
contact
Get the ball rolling.
our town manager
It's too
tomorrow.
easy for these puns, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any other questions of Mr. Mediancy or Mr. Romano? No? Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Romano, and Mr. Fickle as well.
thank you to both. Okay, next item on the agenda is the class size report.
So, Madam Chair, it's an annual exercise. I think the challenge this year, as you can see, it's August 8th. So this could look altogether different within the next 2 weeks. In fact, I can tell you, we've been registering students daily and nightly here in the past couple weeks. So I will present this to you again at the first September meeting, because that'll be a much more accurate presentation. This is just where we are right now. Because what also happens is we start to get, even our own secretaries return Monday, we start to get records requests from families that have moved out of district that we didn't know about, and that's where we unenroll just as many as we start to enroll. So there's no real, delta right now that I can share, but in September 8th, we'll update this and share it with you again.
Okay,
So no action needed at this time.
okay. Anyone have any questions regarding this?
No, but it's, when I look at it, I feel very happy at our class sizes. We should be,
Yeah.
Agreed.
I don't know, you don't expect a lot more enrollment?
We've been pretty, right now, daily. It's been busy. So,
A lot,
yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah,
really?
yeah,
In the lower grades?
yep. Yeah. I mean, last year, we were plus 130 students.
Yeah, I know.
So, you got a hot real estate market in a desirable town, people are gonna come.
If you build it,
I
they
know,
will
I
come.
just- Yeah, so
Yeah.
you think this is a busy time now?
Yes,
right?
very much so.
Okay.
Keep us posted, please, Mr.
I will.
Mediancy. Okay, we've already done those. All right, time for public communications for non-agenda items. So if you would come up to the podium, give us your name and your address. You have 5 minutes.
All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me and for this riveting meeting so far. Tennis courts, great. My name's Josh Bachman. I live at 9 Old Oak Court in Southington, which is in Hillcrest Village. That's right off Meriden Waterbury Turnpike on the southern eastern edge of town. I am a father and a personal injury lawyer. So my concern that I bring to the board is about the school bus shelter that is located inside of Hillcrest Village that is currently being used for pickup and drop-off of elementary school-age children, but is not being used for middle school and high school-age children leading into this next school year. I myself am a father of 3. I have daughters that are 7 and 9, and a son who is 4. They all go to South End, or at least will go to South End as of about 3 weeks from now, and will eventually go to the middle school and the high school. I've come today to advocate that we move the school pickup and drop-off locations for middle school and high school students to the school bus shelter inside of Hillcrest Village. That's on, I'm trying to think what the road is now. That's at the end of Kiefer, right inside of the village. And this is, I think, undoubtedly a safer pickup and drop-off space for students of all ages, and would be beneficial to our community and safer for our kids. I think we as a town have experienced more than ever the dangers of people speeding on highway roads, speeding on highways, that something like flashing lights, police lights, or school bus stop sign lights don't deter drivers from unsafe driving on roads in and around town. Specifically, this school bus shelter was mandated by the town to be built for the safety of students at homes inside of Hillcrest Village because of concerns of speeding vehicles and of traffic on Meriden Waterbury Turnpike. My understanding from statements by Peter Romano is that the board has approved a 2023 policy regarding where access to bus stops are, and specifically that policy dictates that school bus stops for pickup and drop-off should not be on private roads inside of HOAs, and that is currently the operation department's main objection to moving this school bus shelter or moving school bus pickup and drop-off to the school bus shelter as opposed to Meriden Waterbury Turnpike. I think what's notable about this shelter specifically is it exists right at the end of Kiefer Road, where there is a traffic circle that connects directly to Kiefer and then to the interior of Hillcrest Village. My assumption is that this policy of not allowing school bus stops to be inside of or outside of public roadways is for maintenance concerns, most notably for things like snow plowing, ice treatments, things like that. I think what's most notable about where this school bus shelter is being right at the end of Kiefer Road. The plows for the town exit Kiefer Road and run around this traffic circle, plowing this traffic circle in order for buses that are picking up students on Kiefer to run around the circle and then exit out. So the residents of Hillcrest essentially permit buses and these plows to do this turnaround in this circle that is Hillcrest property. And we ask in return that our students be allowed to have a safe pickup and a safe drop-off, that the town mandates that the safety of our students, not just our elementary age students, because my daughters are 7 and 9, but they're going to be in middle school at age 12. They're no more able to dodge a speeding car at age 12 than they are now. They're no more aware of a car passing a bus illegally at age 12 than they are now. And the idea that somehow we've created this extra bit of safety for these elementary school age kids, for my kids now, but we're going to disregard that same safety concern for middle schoolers and for high schoolers is, I think, foolish. And I think we can easily correct and we can easily take this safety feature that we have, that the town's mandated that Hillcrest Village build. That was part of the pitch to homeowners when they built homes and when they purchased homes in Hillcrest. This was a pitch that we have this safe space. We have this covered space, whether it's raining, whether it's snowing. We have a spot for pickup and drop-off that is automatically safer than out on Meriden Waterbury Turnpike that we can use. It's akin, I think, to seeing a safety feature, seeing a seatbelt in your car and choosing not to use it. I wouldn't tell my kids when they're in middle school that they don't have to wear their seatbelts any more than I would say pick a safer option when it's available, when it's easy. And in this case, for the town, it is alarmingly easy to ensure extra safety of the kids in a village in town where there is a large number of young people coming into our schools. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much for your consideration, and I do hope that the board can direct operations while we're still creating our new school bus schedules now, that the school bus should be redirected for pickup inside of Hillcrest Village at the shelter instead of on Meriden Waterbury Turnpike. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anyone else in the audience care to speak? Please give your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name's Steve J. Slavic. I live at 107 Woodbury Hill Drive. I'm the boys tennis coach at the high school. So I want to just express gratitude. I know I'm out of order because this is non-agenda items, and I was listening to this at home. I just want to thank everyone for the spirited discussion about the courts. I know you received a letter. The letter was not written by me, despite it looks like my name being placed at the top. It was sort of representing some of the tennis community here, and I think came off a little bit more aggressively than it really should have. But I'm here in case. I mean, do you folks have any questions that I could address about the situation, providing some context? I want to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. I'm thankful there was a conversation about it tonight. You know, I'm the tennis coach. I'm a father of a player on the team who's in the high school. It means a lot. I don't know if there's anything that I can clear up from before. I know that we mentioned off-site being a Panthorn no longer has 4 courts. The largest in-town site we have is 3 courts. And I would, again, are there any questions that I could?
I think we're good.
Okay, again,
No,
just
no,
want to be part of the solution, not part of the problem.
You will
but
be part of this solution, believe me, because having been a parent of a student who had to go off-site for his senior year, I understand trying to juggle and all that, but I thank you for taking the time to come down.
Thank you
You were
for
No,
watching
sure,
from home.
yeah.
and
I
you
mean,
came-
it was fast getting into the car and getting down here. The one thing I would probably suggest is, and, obviously no one likes the idea of off-site. No one likes the idea of playing all of your matches on the road. I also don't want to sacrifice doing what's right for what's expedient. This is a long-term 20-year, 25-year decision that you're looking at. I hear the weighing of the concrete versus post-tension. Good luck finding any town that's putting in concrete. Berlin, Windsor, Conard Hall, everyone's going post-tension. That's the only thing that can hold up in New England. And I think Mr. Medancy did an excellent job explaining that earlier. And if there are bumps and bruises that we have to endure for a year, if I've got to be on a bus every day with high school kids, we can handle that to do whatever you folks believe is right. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, hearing none. We are going to go back into executive session to continue our discussion. So what that means, executive session means that we're going to be inside in the room, and we're going to come back out after we're done, okay? We good? No, I don't have to make a motion. We already had a motion. So we can just go back in. Yeah. Yep.